What do you do when your own neighborhood turns against you, when the people you trusted, the ones who handed you the welcome packet, the smiles, the fake concerns, suddenly threaten to take your home, not with guns or fists, but with paperwork, fines, and the kind of silence that feels like suffocation? That's what happened to me. It started with a garden. My wife's garden. She had passed away the year before. That garden, it was all I had left of her. And one morning a letter showed up. You're in violation of HOA Ordinance 1 for a... Apparently, her garden wasn't on my land anymore. They said it was on common land I had mowed and maintained, loved, land I believed was mine. They fined me, threatened legal action, filed a lien against my home, a place I lived for 15 years, all over 8 feet of soil, all over peace. This is not just a story about a neighborhood gone wrong. This is a story about grief, control, and the danger of signing papers you don't read. This is HOA Exposed. When I bought the house on Ridgeway Lane, I wasn't just buying property, I was buying peace. After nearly 3 decades of working freight logistics, grinding out 12-hour shifts, sleeping in motels, and missing holidays, I was finally ready to slow down. I wanted a quiet street, a patch of land, and time to spend with Emily, my wife of 22 years. Willow Creek was everything we'd been dreaming of. Tree-lined sidewalks, morning birdsong, a community lake. The kind of place that sold itself, not with flashy billboards, but with its silence, its stillness. We found a modest 2-story house on a cul-de-sac with just enough backyard for Emily's garden. She loved lavender, loved working with her hands in the soil, humming old gospel songs as she pulled weeds and whispered to the bees. When we moved in, the neighbors brought over baked goods. The HOA president, a clean-cut guy named Gerald, handed us a welcome packet and told us, "We're just here to keep things running smoothly." It felt like joining a club, a good one. We didn't ask too many questions, and maybe that was our first mistake. Like most people, I signed the HOA agreement without reading every clause, the fine print about fences, garbage bins, lawn heights, and shared green spaces. It all sounded reasonable. Besides, the fees were affordable, about $650 a year. They covered snow removal, holiday lights, and quarterly community newsletters, with recipes and shout-outs for neighborhood birthdays. What could possibly go wrong? For years, nothing did. Emily made friends, hosted summer brunches in the backyard, joined the book club, and that garden of hers, it bloomed. Tomatoes, zinnias, lavender, and these absurdly stubborn rosemary bushes that survived every frost. We never had any issues with the HOA. We kept our grass trimmed, paid on time, smiled at Gerald when we passed him walking his poodle. It was the life we worked for until everything changed. Narrator. Emotional pause. Emily got sick in late 2019. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. By the time we caught it, the doctors gave her 6 months. She made it 7. I buried her on a rainy Thursday morning. After that, the house was silent in a way I'd never heard before. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was empty. For months, I wandered from room to room, talking to the walls. The only thing that brought me any comfort was her garden. That little patch of earth, it felt alive with her presence, her care. So I expanded it, just a little, moved a few stones back, planted new tomatoes, added a small bench where I could sit and read her old paperbacks. The yard sloped gently down toward a thicket of trees at the far end. It didn't look like anyone else maintained that patch. No fencing, no signage, just open land. I thought nothing of it. After all, no one had ever said a word, until they did. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, taped to my mailbox in a plastic sleeve. Notice of violation, HOA Regulation 1 for A. Unauthorized encroachment onto community land. Immediate remediation required. It was typed. No signature, no name, just a printed seal from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. I read it 3 times before it even registered. Encroachment. On what? That strip of grass I planted a few zinnias on the bench. It didn't make sense. I grabbed my tape measure and marched outside. From the edge of the back deck to the last planter box, it was about 22 feet. According to my home purchase documents, which I dug out of the dusty filing cabinet, Emily had always kept organized. The property line ended just a few feet before the trees. I was well within my bounds, or so I believed. I called the number on the letter. No answer. I emailed the board. No reply. Finally, I hand-delivered a note to the HOA office, just a small drop box at the community clubhouse. 2 days later, I received an email, short, cold. Dear Mr. Carter, thank you for your inquiry. The land in question is classified as community green space per the Willow Creek subdivision plat. Encroachments must be removed within 14 calendar days to avoid fines. No details, no map, no meeting offered. I replied, asking for clarification. A site visit, anything. The response, HOA guidelines are final. It was like talking to a brick wall. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a garden, it was about control. They wanted me to back down, to feel like I didn't belong on land I had lived on and paid for over 15 years. I wasn't about to give up. Not on Emily's garden, not on the last thing she touched before she left. So I prepared for a fight. The thing about conflict is, it never starts with a gunshot. It starts with a whisper, a rule, a letter, a neighbor looking the other way when you wave. That's how my war with the HOA began. I didn't see it coming. Not over a garden. A few weeks after that first notice, I came home to find a bright orange paper stuck to my door. Not a warning this time, a fine, $25 per day. Retroactive to April 4th. Encroachment of HOA green space. Non-compliance will result in escalated legal action. I stood there with the paper in my hand, staring at the same flowers my wife had once planted. The rosemary she used in her roasts. The lavender that kept her calm during chemo. Now, this garden was being called a violation. I felt sick. I contacted a surveyor. I wanted clear hard evidence that the land was mine. He came out the following Tuesday, clipboard in hand, and spent nearly 3 hours taking measurements. He looked at my deed, traced the plat lines, and pointed to the edge of the garden. His words were careful. The property line technically ends about 6 feet before this last planter. That strip beyond, it's unclaimed. It's what's known as residual land. Residual land. Not HOA land. Not private land, just a forgotten patch. But somehow the HOA had claimed it as common property. He shook his head. Legally, they'd need a deed or transfer title. Without that, have no enforceable ownership. So I asked for a copy of the plat they were referring to. The HOA ignored the request. I wasn't trying to make trouble. I was grieving. That garden wasn't just flowers, it was my therapy. Something to keep me going after losing the one person who truly made this place feel like home. So, I decided to attend the monthly HOA meeting. I wanted answers. I wanted to show them I wasn't being disrespectful. I was just trying to live. But when I arrived at the community clubhouse that evening, the sign on the door read, closed board session, members only, members only. I was a homeowner, wasn't I a member? Apparently they had changed the bylaws to allow private sessions under legal deliberations. I wasn't allowed in. They were discussing my property, my garden, and I wasn't even allowed to sit in the room. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated fast. The fines jumped to $50 a day, then $100. The HOA began sending official violation letters stamped with legalese, referencing remedies permitted under subdivision covenant law. I received one every 3 days. Like clockwork. My mailbox had become a battlefield. I tried talking to neighbors, some sympathized. One elderly couple even told me they did something similar to our son over a mailbox post. Others avoided me. I started noticing curtains pulling back when I walked by. A few people I'd shared wine with on summer nights now acted like I didn't exist. Isolation, that's how HOAs win. Not by proving they're right, but by making you feel like no one else is willing to stand beside you. But the part that broke me, one morning, I found my wife's garden torn up. The rosemary bush ripped out. The stones she hand-painted with our grandkids' names gone. The bench, smashed, left in pieces by the tree line. No letter, no signature, no warning. Just destruction. Stood in the soil, mud soaking my socks, staring at the place that had once been my sanctuary, now turned to ruin. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about rules. This was targeted. Someone had taken this personally, and they were going to make sure I suffered for pushing back. I took photos, logged every date, kept every letter, every email. I started documenting everything. If they wanted a fight, I was going to give them one, but not with fists. With facts. I sent a formal request for a hearing, not just an email, but a certified letter with a return receipt. And guess what? They denied it again. They claimed I had already received multiple notices and that the case had been resolved. Internally, resolved by whom? There was no vote, no appeal, no mediator, just a board of 6 people making decisions behind closed doors. They were judge, jury, and now, executioners. It was around this time I realized something important. HOAs don't rely on being right. They rely on you being too tired, too overwhelmed, or too ashamed to fight back. They hit you with wave after wave of letters, threats, isolation. Most people fold. I didn't, not because I'm brave, but because that patch of earth was the only place that still felt like home, and I wasn't going to let them bury my wife's memory under a pile of technicalities, not without a fight. I thought things had already hit rock bottom, but I was wrong, because when you refuse to back down from an HOA, their next move isn't negotiation, it's escalation. 2 weeks after they destroyed Emily's garden, I received a thick envelope. In the mail, it wasn't the usual violation letter. This one was from a law firm in a neighboring city. It was cold, brutal, a formal notice of lien on my property. According to their records, I now owed the HOA $3,250 in back fines, legal processing, fees, administrative costs, and something they called nuisance penalties. The language was intentionally intimidating. Continued failure to comply will result in foreclosure proceedings as permitted under HOA regulations and state law. I had to sit down. I actually thought I was going to be sick. They weren't just coming after the garden anymore. They were coming for the house, my home. The place where I had loved, lost, and spent 15 years building a life, gone because I refused to dig up a patch of rosemary. I remember holding that letter and thinking, this can't be legal, can it? That night I barely slept. I stayed up rereading every page of the HOA agreement, every violation notice, and every email I had received. The more I read, the more confused I became. The HOA claimed the garden encroached on common land, but where exactly was the proof that they even owned that land? The next morning, I decided it was time to bring in help. I called a local attorney named Mitch Landry, young guy, maybe early 30s, but sharp. He specialized in property law and had handled HOA cases before. I dropped the envelope on his desk, along with my purchase documents and a flash drive with every photo, email, and letter I had saved. He spent about an hour flipping through everything. Then he leaned back, sighed, and looked at me. This is going to be messy, he said. But you're not wrong. He explained something I hadn't known before. HOAs don't automatically own the common areas unless the developer formally transfers that land to them with a legal deed. And in my case, that transfer never happened. Mitch pulled up county records. He found that the original builder of Willow Creek went bankrupt halfway through the development. While they filed the initial plat, they never finished assigning the green space parcels, which meant the HOA's claim on that land was on shaky ground at best. We had a foothold. Mitch filed a motion to challenge the lien, citing lack of ownership and due process violations. We included all the correspondence, surveyor notes, and photos. We demanded they prove legal control of the land before enforcing any fine. The response from the HOA: silence, no email, no call, no apology. But the next week, I got a new notice, this time claiming I had violated a new rule, improper legal action against the board. They were now threatening to fine me for hiring a lawyer. I couldn't believe it. The same people who refused to talk to me, who denied me access to meetings, who fined me for standing up for my rights, were now trying to punish me for defending myself. Meanwhile, the lien sat there like a time bomb. The bank wouldn't intervene. My mortgage company was starting to ask questions. My homeowner's insurance premium increased. I was being financially cornered, and the worst part, some of the neighbors had started turning completely against me. A man named Doug, who once borrowed my ladder every spring, stopped waving when I passed his driveway. A woman who used to walk her golden retriever with Emily now crossed the street when she saw me at the grocery store. I overheard someone whisper, "That's the guy suing the H." They made me the villain, they made me the problem, but what they didn't realize is that I was documenting everything. Every notice, every fine, every ignored email, every interaction. Mitch encouraged me to file a complaint with the county property board, and another with the state attorney general's office under abuse of civil process. And when we subpoenaed the HOA's legal records and asked them to present the deed that proved they owned the land, they stalled, they delayed, then they claimed the deed was lost. In the transition from the original developer, you could practically smell the desperation. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't after revenge. I wasn't even after money. I just wanted to be left alone, to sit on the bench where Emily used to read. To water the tomatoes she used to laugh at, because they always came out to sour. To exist in peace, in a home I worked my entire life to afford. But they weren't going to let that happen, not because of rules, but because I refused to bow to them. That's the real problem with power. When you stand up to it, it doesn't retreat, it doubles down. So I kept going. Mitch filed for a formal injunction. We asked the court to freeze the lien and force the HOA to prove it's legal. authority to issue fines if they couldn't prove ownership of that strip of land. Everything they'd done to me, every dollar fined, every letter sent, every threat made was not just abusive, it was unlawful. And for the first time in months, I had hope, not because I knew I'd win, but because I knew I finally had a voice, and this time, someone would be forced to listen. Courtrooms aren't like they look on TV. There's no shouting, no drama, just fluorescent lighting, short tempers, and legal language, so dry you feel like you're drowning in it. But in that moment, in that cold room with the wood-paneled walls and stiff chairs, something extraordinary happened. I got the truth. We stood before a judge in district court, presenting our case. On one side of the room, me and Mitch, my attorney. On the other side, the HOA board's legal representative, a superhead man in $1,000 suit and a smirk that never left his face. Their position was clear. They claimed I had violated HOA regulations by using community green space. They argued the lien was legal, the fines were enforceable, and I had knowingly broken subdivision rules. But here's the thing about legal fights. What matters most isn't who talks louder, it's who has the paperwork, and we had plenty. Mitch began with our strongest point, the missing deed. He showed the judge that, according to county land records, the HOA had never been granted ownership of the strip of land in question. The developer of Willow Creek had filed the original plat back in 2003. But when that developer declared bankruptcy a year later, the title to the so-called green space was never transferred, not to the HOA, not to the city, not to anyone, that it was a legal limbo, a forgotten patch of land that didn't belong to them, so how could they claim I was encroaching on their property when they didn't legally own it? The judge flipped through the documents in silence. Then he looked at the HOA's attorney and said, "Can you provide evidence of a recorded deed proving ownership?" There was a pause, a long one. The attorney adjusted his tie and muttered something about administrative transfers and implied control, but the judge wasn't buying it. "No assumptions here," he said. "Show me the paperwork or show me the door." That was the turning point. Mitch went further. He showed correspondence from the HOA where they refused to provide documentation, denied meeting access, and threatened fines without hearings. He laid out the timeline, the notices, the fines, the destruction of the garden, the lien, the refusal to meet, piece by piece. He exposed a pattern of abuse, not enforcement. It was chilling to hear it all laid out so plainly. I'd lived it, but now, someone in power finally saw it. When the judge issued his ruling, he didn't even hesitate. The lien is invalid. The fines are void. The HOA acted outside its legal authority. Mr. Carter retains full rights to the disputed land area unless otherwise lawfully challenged. It was over. Just like that. No apology, no handshake, no remorse. But it was a win. And for the first time, in a long time, I could breathe. The next HOA meeting was packed. More people than I'd ever seen in that little clubhouse. Some came to support me. Others came for answers. And a few came just to see the board squirm. I stood up and told the story. Every detail. Not with anger, but with clarity. I told them about Emily, about the garden, about the fines, the silence, the lien, about the lies. And then I held up a copy of the court ruling and said, "This is what happens when you push too far. This is what happens when you forget that homeowners aren't just names on a spreadsheet. We're people, and we deserve to be treated that way." A few people clapped. Some looked away. The board said nothing. Gerald, the president, the same man who once handed me a welcome packet with a smile, had resigned the week before. No explanation, dust gone. But the damage wasn't the garden. What remained of it was a scarred piece of land. The bench Emily used to sit on was beyond repair. The rosemary didn't grow back that year, and even though I had one, something in me had changed. It's hard to live somewhere that tried to erase you. Even harder when the people who watched it happen pretend it never did. I started looking at the house differently. The walls felt tighter, the neighborhood quieter, the smiles more distant. So I made a decision. I put the house on the market, not out of fear, but because I knew I couldn't plant anything new in a place that tried so hard to uproot me. It sold fast, quicker than I expected. Maybe people just saw the freshly cleared backyard and the low HOA fees and thought it was a steal. Maybe they never asked why the old man left. I packed up quietly, took only what mattered. I left behind the garden, the stones. The mailbox. But I brought the ruling, the truth, the evidence, because those things, they travel with you, and they matter, not just to me, but to every homeowner who's ever been bullied, silenced, or steamrolled by an HOA board, more obsessed with power than people. You might think this kind of thing is rare, It's not. Across the country, HOAs are flexing their power in ways most people don't understand until it's too late. Over flower beds, lawn chairs, fence paint, tree heights, and yes, gardens, they use vague covenants, ignored boundaries, and legal intimidation to keep you quiet. But you don't have to be quiet, you just have to be ready. You have to document, you have to challenge, you have to fight. Because the only thing scarier than an HOA with too much power is a homeowner who thinks they have none. I've been gone from Willow Creek for almost a year now. Different house, different town, different life. But I still have dreams about that place, not the good ones. Not the ones with barbecues and laughter and the sound of Emily's humming in the garden. No, the ones where I wake up to another fine taped to the door, another notice in the mail, another neighbor turning their back. What the HOA took from me wasn't just money or plants or soil. They took the peace I had spent a lifetime trying to earn, and I'm not the only one. Since my story went public, I've heard from people all across the country, homeowners just like me, who faced the same intimidation, silence, and weaponized bureaucracy. One woman in Arizona was fined $200 for planting sunflowers in her front yard. A veteran in Florida was threatened with foreclosure for painting his porch a shade too bold. A retired teacher in Oregon had to fight her HOA for 6 months just to keep a small wooden swing her grandkids played on. These aren't isolated incidents. They're a pattern, a warning, and it's time people started listening. HOAs were supposed to protect communities, not prey on them. They were supposed to maintain standards, not destroy lives over technicalities written in fine print no one really understands. But here's what they never tell you when you move in. Many HOAs are run like private governments, with unchecked power, vague rules, and board members who can rewrite enforcement policies without oversight. And unless you challenge them legally, publicly, they assume they can get away with anything. They fine you, they shame you, they isolate you. And they do it because it works. Because most people are too afraid or too tired or too alone to fight back. But that's how they win. By convincing you you're the problem. Let me be clear, you are not the problem. Wanting to plant flowers isn't a problem. Caring about your home isn't a violation. Asking questions isn't grounds for retaliation. What's broken is the system that allows private associations to behave like landlords while calling themselves protectors of the neighborhood. And what's worse, there's often no higher authority to appeal to, no oversight, no one to say, this has gone too far, unless you take it there yourself. That's why I started sharing my story, not for sympathy, but for strength. Because someone out there, maybe even you, is standing in their kitchen right now, holding a violation letter and wondering how the hell it came to this. Maybe it's over a fence, a tree, a shed, a mailbox, or maybe it's something even more personal. Whatever it is, I want you to know this. You are not alone, you are not powerless, and you are not crazy for thinking something is wrong, because something is wrong, and until more of us speak up, they'll keep getting away with it. I don't miss that house. I don't miss the HOA, but I do miss the garden. Even after everything, I still think about it. The way Emily used to crouch down next to the rosemary, hands dirty, smiling up at me like she was building something sacred. And maybe she was. Maybe it wasn't just a garden. Maybe it was a line, a quiet, beautiful line between what they could control and what they couldn't. They tried to erase her, but they couldn't. Because you can destroy a garden, but you can't destroy why it was planted. If you've made it this far, thank you. This wasn't just a story about me, it was a story about you, your rights, your voice, your home. So, if you've ever been targeted, harassed, or punished by an HOA, drop your story in the comments below. Let's shine a light on every unfair fine, every broken garden, every silence forced by fear. Like this video if you believe homeowners deserve protection, not punishment. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And subscribe to HOA Exposed for more stories like this. The ones they hope you never find. Because the only thing stronger than a homeowners association ... is a homeowner who refuses to stay quiet. This is HOA Exposed. And we're just getting started.